So developing an interview guide. I will just take this session and then I think in 20 minutes and then we can go for a breakout room activity. And in breakout room, you have to, we will, how many, 4 groups, how many participants are there?
4-5 groups were there.
Okay.
30.
So till now, what we have done, so we have started our day with the basic concepts of qualitative research design. We have seen the difference, how it is different from the quantitative one. What are the various paradigm? What is the world's view? What is the ontology, epistemology, axiology, and research method? We have seen the inductive and deductive approaches. We have seen the various type of qualitative research approach like grounded theory, phenomenology, ethnography, narrative research, case study, qualitative, descriptive, and mixed method. We have seen how a protocol is drafted, what are the various components of the protocol, what is in introduction, what should be the sections, what is the problem statement, what is a purpose statement, the research questions, what is a central question, what is a sub-question, what is a central phenomena, what all should be there in your central phenomena, how you should do the review of literature, what is a literature review map, how that literature review map helps you in making a interview guide. So now we assume that you have got this literature map or you have searched the literature. And then you have to develop an interview guide. So what are the, how you can develop an interview guide. So for an interview guide, like we have discussed, there should be 2 W and 1 H, means what, how, and why. So all the answers to all these 3 questions will be an open-ended answer. So your question should be an open-ended question. Like if I ask this question from a patient who is taking a treatment from AIIMS Delhi, like rate your level of satisfaction at AIIMS Delhi on a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 means worst and 10 means excellent. From a qualitative research perspective, what is the problem in this question? Please type in the chat box. Regarding open or closed-ended. Yes, Subhapriya is very right. Satisfaction of what and whom? There may be many aspects. Very right, Dr. Anjali. So this is a very broad leading questions and closed question. Priyanka is right. So all of you are very correct in your statement that because how he will rate, like Dr. Anjali has also said, like which part, how. So experience, he might say that experience of doctor was good, but experience at reception was worse. He might say that you might think like, why not take a different response? So we'll take a response at reception counter also, and we'll take a response of doctor satisfaction also. But again, the problem will come. He might say that, yes, doctor was excellent in knowledge, but he was very poor in communication. So such dilemma will always exist whenever you're doing something on a scale-based thing. So because we are not giving enough opportunity to that person to express his or her, very tight responses are not suitable and you cannot frame every sentence. So initially, that's why we also say in scale development, you start with qualitative interview and you try to pick out all those terms which are helpful in, rating a satisfaction level or doing something where you can rate all components of a patient satisfaction. Because here we have not given the enough opportunity to that patient to express his satisfaction. So in quantitative research, generally participants respond through options, whereas in qualitative research, the participants respond through words. So now coming to development of an interview guide. So whenever you have to develop your interview guide, first thing is, as an interviewer, you have to be very patient with them. So it is your responsibility to help them to remember. Because we have discussed that if you ask this question, how and why, it takes some cognitive load. Means you cannot answer this question directly. So like if you should think like what are the different types of questions which you have to ask, and what are the different type of questions which you should avoid. That is also very important. So like generally you design your question, this interview guide in 3 sections. There is an opening section, there's a middle section, and then there is a closing section. So we'll talk about these sections one by one. So the opening section, like you start your questionnaire with some introduction, some rapport building questions, and again you give them consent and you ask about you inform about the research. So this opening is basically these introduction, topics, and ethics and consent. Then comes your middle section. So your middle section has got the most of the interview questions. The topics of those like is questions and sub questions, and then you have got prompts and you have got probes. So now there is a difference between these prompts and probe. Yes, can someone type in the chat box what is the difference between prompts and probe? So like prompt is
Probing is
yeah.
probing is you want to explore further, whereas prompts are you're nudging them like yes, you're encouraging them to open up more.
True. Very, very right. So prompting is like, enabling them, means helping them, saying some word so that, they should understand, like they have to answer. So that is the prompt. And probing is to dig further. Like if there's something, you go on exploring. So that is your probing. So probing, we are exploring the same question. Prompts are helpful factors. Yes, prompt is to help them remembering, or prompt is to like suggest them something, like say one word or few things, and then they will come up. So this is prompt of for making someone on speak. Probe seek clarification. True. So now and then there is a closing section. So yes, is there any fixed guideline to make an interview question? Yes. Is there any guideline? Yes, very right. There's no fix. It is very flexible. The interview guide of a qualitative research is a very flexible, but you should remember some important tips if you are making an interview guide. First, please, very important, do the literature review, because literature review will help you in jotting down all the factors so that whenever you go in to take the interview, you should not miss out on those factors. You go with some factors in your mind. So that is your literature review. Second comes your like initial rapport building questions. So whenever you ask questions, you should start with like uh, something like how they have come, their travel, who all are there in the family, so that they are in a habit of speaking. Once they are into that mode of speaking, then you should pose your question. So that's why you should start with some light questions initially. Again, you should start with some broad questions and then you can narrow it down to further detail. Like we have discussed the central questions and sub questions. So that probing will help you in, in making the further part of those sub questions. So you can see, I think we have not taken the snapshot, but if you see that book Saldana, they have also given, they have mentioned this interview technique as a part of instrumentation. That heading is instrumentation. Means in instrument, they write instrument, means interview guide. So they have given 3-4 samples where they have written like one major questions and then there are sub questions, how you can probe further. So you should start with some broad questions and then narrow down to know the details. And then you may ask some hypothetical questions also. Like in this case, if you ask this question after amputation, how your life got changed, you can ask this question. Or if you have to ask this question as a hypothetical question, because this is a negative question. So you may ask like, what do you think would have been your life different if your leg has not been amputated? So this is a same thing which you are asking in a different context. Like what do you think would have been different in your life if you have not been your leg amputated? So this is a hypothetical question. Again, if my question is like you are studying student belief about group activity, one of the question from student, you can ask like, what do you suggest to improve group activity? So you can ask like, imagine that you are a teacher, how will you plan a group activity? So you can ask such hypothetical questions also from the participant. Now, next step is think about the data analysis while you are framing the question. This is very, very, very important. And that will help you in keeping a track of what should include and what should not. So always remember your research question, because many times what will happen that the participants will try to digress right here and there, but you have to bring them back to the main point, because if they are very emotional, they will start telling everything but not to your questions. So of course listen to them for a few minutes, and again intelligently you have to bring them back to the track. Otherwise, in your analysis, you will not get the excerpt related to your question. So you have to think about the data analysis. That's why if you have a data analysis plan and if you imagine data analysis, then while taking interview also it will help you in that process. So let's develop the interview guide. So I'll just show you how to do that. I'll show you with this research which we have done on the filariasis. So for that we have to open a Word document, and in the beginning you write your research question, because we discussed that with the central question and sub questions we formulate our interview guide. So write your research question, and now you should start focusing on each research question. Let's say if there are 3 research questions in your protocol. Take one research question, dissect it. Then take second, then dissect it. Then third, then dissect it. And then you should try as many research questions as possible. And then once you start with a very broad one. Initially, when you start writing it, the interview guide, it is very crude. Mind it is very crude. So just start jotting it down, whatever comes to your mind, seeing that questions and seeing that literature, because you have got that literature review also in front of you. So taking the research question and literature review in front of you, you should start writing your question. Now if this is the topic, barriers to effective communication among healthcare, a worker in managing chronic disease, a descriptive qualitative study. So here I will have to approach, either I can go for my own framework or I can use some existing framework. So if I use some existing framework, like that Canon approach we have seen, then you can take, means that approach also we can take, but questionnaire we have to write it. So again, I can start with a deductive framework. So I may write that I will use that Canon framework and I'll draft questions according to that, or I will make my own framework, some approach, which will be entirely a inductive one. So I need to do a thorough literature review. So probably I have done these literature review and I want to know about the perception of communication barriers. What are the influencers of this communication effectiveness? What are the healthcare decision making? Uh, how it got impacted by these communications? And what are the institutional barriers? So this is a tentative framework, but again, this may vary according to literature review. So these are like, one girl was also saying, these are again many framework, which again was given by AI, that is the COM-B model, 4 habits model, health literacy. We don't know much of this, but again, I think health belief this, we know social ecological model. So you can use any of these framework and you can get the detail in the literature. It's best to again review one article also related to these framework, because AI, it's good for initial workup, but you should again cross-check it with the actual reference. Whatever it is saying, whether there is any deviations from the, actual framework or not. So you can select a framework based on your own objective and then adapt to that framework. But again, we have I think done 4 or 5 qualitative research and published that, but we have not used any framework because we thought like we were more comfortable in only doing the literature search and writing questions rather than to develop a review this thing guide. So this was the research that Ria and Bhavna. Ria is also one of the facilitator, although I think today it got late. So she has done the analysis of this. Like whenever I tell her to wear slippers, she turns a deaf ear. She never listens. This is a qualitative descriptive research on the barriers to the basic lymphedema management and quality of life in lymphatic filariasis patient in a rural block of Eastern India. So this is very different. You know, whenever we see that, we always blame the healthcare worker and the whole system. But many times, like I was discussing you in the morning regarding the diet diversity. So we always, we never make that person accountable for anything. So that is not a very good idea, because see, it's the person's responsibility also to take care of the feet, because there are many domains where he's taking care or she's taking care. So similarly, you should have some other lenses and angle also whenever you are seeing any data. Not always we should not always see from the angle that patient is always on the the plight, he's always in plight. It is not always true, because here also, if you see the title, she's saying that she never listens. Whenever I tell her to wear slippers, she turns a deaf ear. She never listens. That means the kind of behavior she is having, you cannot attribute that Asha has not told or she did not get the medicine, etc. Okay, so this was the barriers to basic lymphedema management. So it was a qualitative descriptive study. And here the research, we wanted to assess the perceived barriers to the lymphedema management and quality of life of lymphatic filariasis patients in rural Bihar. So we identified 3 research questions. The first was, I will show you over this, and you have to develop on the communication barriers. So first research question was, what are the perceived barriers to basic lymphedema management among lymphatic filariasis? Second was, what coping mechanism or strategies they use to manage their lymphedema, and how do the perceived barriers management impact the quality of life? These were the 3 research question. So let's develop an interview guide. So I'll first show you. This was the one basic. I will just demonstrate. So this is a rough interview guide. So I've started with this title, that some welcome and introduction, then some basic demographic questions. So like you can see here, it is about their gender, occupation, or specific occupation in the society. Then what are the knowledge of lymphedema and filariasis? And then some broad questions like, what do you know about the disease? In your experience, what are the common symptoms of disease? And then my next is like healthcare practices and treatment. So what do they do if they have chills during edema? There are some barriers of effective management. Then what are the support which they get from the health system? And then some other questions. So these are some broad which we have identified through literature search. I have formulated this. And then interview guide will be different, because if there are various stakeholders, like in this case, there were healthcare workers like Asha and A&M, then there was a caregiver, then there was patients, and then there was medical officers. So there were 4 stakeholders. So the question interview guide will be different for all the 4 people. For patient, it will be different. And for healthcare worker also, if you are interviewing a medical professional and if you are doing interviewing Asha, it will be different, because their background is different, their literacy and their education status is different. So those many interview guide you have to draft. And then it was just the closing this thing, like any other question which he or she wants to tell. And this was for the patients. So initial, you can see here, this was for the healthcare provider. This one. This was for the healthcare provider. And then it was for the lymphedema patients. And there were some modifications. And it was for the caregiver, relatives of lymphedema patients. So this was the rough one, and if I show you the final one, so this was the final. Again, the same questions. We have shared these folders with you people. Like how do you define what are the, so here you can see like what, how, what do you see the biggest barriers? How is your experience regarding the adherence? In your opinion, why some patients fail to adhere? Again, what is the problem with this question? What is the problem with this question? Second question. I'll just highlight it. Yes, what is the problem with this question?
It can be given a binary answer, yes or no.
Yeah. So your interview guide should not have any question like, are there enough resources? That means what I will answer, yes or no, and then it gets closed. Then I have nothing to code. So this is the wrong question. Your question should never start from something which the answer is like rightly said, yes or no. If you see other questions also, in your opinion, there are few questions where yes, how long, how and why, what, and you can roughly also scan the questions.
Don't feel. Yes or no.
Do you feel? Yeah. Do you feel you receive enough information and guidance? Again, this is a close-ended question because he
Another
will
question, do you experience any social or emotional? I can say yes and no. And
yeah,
until you qualify what kind of stigmas, ma'am, just five, ma'am, three, bullet number three. Go above, ma'am.
yeah,
Do you
yeah.
experience? Yeah.
Yeah, very, very rightly said. So you will see that when we will do the analysis also, there you will exactly feel what it is like if you see something in yes and no. Because you are very hyper that you are going to code that particular verbatim. And then when you see your transcript, then answer is yes or no. Then you can't do because you cannot do the coding on the question. You have to do the coding or analysis on the answers. So that's why you just imagine that you have to do the coding, and then if that much paragraph is not there, transcript is not rich, you will have nothing to analyze. So that's the way interview guide should be. This is only the rough this thing. So I think we should just a sec. Okay, let me read. I'm sorry, I forgot to read the instruction. Dr. Shamshad is telling me that before going to the breakout room activity, I should read it. So I'm sorry, I will read this. So yes, this communication barriers, again, I think someone else can do this. Yes, can someone read this?
Communication barriers between healthcare workers and patients in chronic disease management can lead to misunderstandings, reduced treatment adherence, and poor health outcomes. These barriers, such as language differences, cultural misunderstandings, and lack of health literacy, have been reported in various healthcare settings globally, but remain underexplored in the context of tertiary hospitals in India. Understanding these barriers is crucial to improving patient outcomes and reducing healthcare costs in chronic disease management.
Thank you. Yes, please continue reading this.
The aim is to assess the perceived barriers to effective patient communication among healthcare workers in managing chronic diseases in a tertiary hospital setting.
So we have, thank you so much. So we will use this framework for exercise into one opening section. Then there will be a middle section where it is divided into three parts. Understanding the communication practices means what generally, the barriers to communication, and what training and support is needed to improve this. So under these three, you can just skip that opening and closing because you all are very good in taking interview, I guess. You just have to go with this middle section of understanding of communication practices, barriers, and training and support. So I think Dr. Anand or Dr. Akash.
Yes, ma'am. I'll open the breakout room.
Okay, so here in this, there are, I think, 4 or 5 participants will be there in each breakout room, and you will have 10 minutes. Okay. So 10 minutes to develop a rough guide. So there shall be one person who will be like mentors will be there. One person will keep on writing the questions, and then you have to share the interview guide at the end of the. Okay, Google Sheet. Okay, it is on Google Sheet, so we will be having those answer responses. So you have to type on this Google Sheet, and then we will compile those questions. We will make a final interview guide, and we'll share that interview guide, on which you have to take the interview tomorrow morning before we start the session. We'll open those many breakout room tomorrow. I think it will be one-to-one interview. So 2 people in one breakout room tomorrow. So right now, 4 people in one breakout room, and you have to develop an interview guide on this Google Sheet, 8 to 10. So 8 to 10 questions. And please use your room number. I think there will be some responses of that room number. So mention your room number also in that Google Sheet. So Anand,